or in some way, maybe in theory, and I'm sorry to cut you off, because what you mentioned is true, is why do we look at it so one-dimensionally, right? To say that it has to be matriarchy or patriarchy in terms of our social structures and how we organize ourselves to achieve our community goals. But
So
maybe
it
could be a blend. It can be a blend. Yeah.
It could be both, right? But I think it's one of those things is, are we prepared as Black men to take a step back and knowing that there's power in that too? You follow what I'm saying? There's power in listening.
I think it's reprogramming, man. I think a lot of brothers, especially in my age group, I'm a 70s baby. So we definitely have to, talk to youngsters and kind of reprogram how they see things, how they look at things like this women's History Month, man. I'm learning some stuff. It's some stuff I just didn't know, man. Like I'm learning about this sister named Frida Gibbs, who was a 3-time world champion kickboxer from Chester, Pennsylvania. And I've never heard of her. So, showing sisters with strength, I think will help. And then just reminding folks like, hey, Black women are the most educated group in the country, man. Like, how can we not benefit from that?
Right. As Black men. You're right.
As Black men.
Right.
And all in all, Black women are mostly waiting on and want to marry Black men.
Come on,
that's the data is there.
Yes.
Sisters are not getting married because they're waiting on the Black man.
Yeah. And, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying a little bit and just kind of expand that conversation about just infrastructure, right? So you said something earlier, Anthony, that really, I think speaks to this is, we need to reprogram the youth to show them that, it can be a blend, or yes, let's honor listening. Let's, that doesn't make you, being vulnerable doesn't make you a weak man, or leaning on your woman for advice doesn't make you a weak man. Your ego is not that fragile. You will be okay. She's there to support you and the cause that you both are forming together. Let's be honest, when women and young men come together and they're talking, and I do these gender role communication activities with young people to showcase what, feminine versus masculine communication looks like. And it's not about gender identity and it's not about gender orientation. It's a very different topic. It's me being very direct and speaking to people without the emotion that would be deemed in society as masculine. Feel me? So then you have men who might, skirt around the topic and might talk about, everything like flowery, or go around in a bush, or whatever that word is, I'm talking about.
Beat around the bush.
Beat around the bush. There you go. So you beat around, skirt around the bush. You know what I mean? So like, you beat around the bush too much, and that would be deemed as a feminine quality. And we learn these behaviors from our upbringings. Part of it might be a little bit of our own personalities, but really it's because we're not having those models. So if someone was growing up in only a matriarchal home, and they've never really seen that male figure, or the male figures come and go, right? That is an infrastructure problem based off of historical trauma, right? And when you talk about the welfare problem that they created, you have to literally leave your family in order to make ends meet. That's infrastructural problem. So we need to start to, now when I hear young people, it's like the value of marriage, because it's been so bastardized. Sorry, it is what it is. People get into marriages and get divorced in like a matter of 6 months sometimes. I've seen it, and it's heartbreaking. And then you go, why did you do this? And it's like, oh, well, I just couldn't handle it. So the patience level, as you're sitting there telling me, Anthony, that people are just waiting for the Black brothers to rise up to the occasion, and just get married. Girls will be dating these boys or men for like, 5 years, and there's no commitment. Right. And it's like, why? What are you waiting for? What's around the corner that isn't being satisfied here? That's what I think women are struggling with. And then when not all women, of course, but, in some relationships, and young people then asking the question, why bother getting married at all?
That comes back to the conditioning, right? I'm a 70s baby. I grew up early era hip hop.
Come on now.
I get around, what I mean?
Right. Wifey. There was R&B songs talking about wifey. And that's having a pseudo commitment,
Yes,
right? Not a real commitment,
right?
but I'm going to give you the label of wifey, but I'm not going to give you the relationship that would be leading into you becoming my wife one day, right? It was more.
We were often given images of men who got married, black or white or whatever, as being emasculated in certain ways. So you were like, ain't no way marriage could be cool. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're being programmed with this information. Like,
right.
You know, you're being told from people who've never been married, like, oh, you getting married. I remember when I decided to get married, my boys were like, man, you serious?
Don't do it. Reconsider.
Yeah, you know,
Right.
even at the celebration of your nuptials, you know what I'm saying? Brothers are backing away for the garter, while sisters are fighting for the bouquet.
Interesting. That's right. That's right.
You know it's that social conditioning, man. But I know a lot of black men that want to get married.
Right.
I know a lot of black men that want to have successful marriages. You know what I mean? But I think honestly, I just feel like there's a dynamic shift. It's gonna get ugly. That pendulum is weird. It's crazy, man. It swings both ways.
So in speaking to that, right? How do we conceptualize the black male identity with regards to, you know, capitalism, our ambition to go out there, make money, whether that be through a career or whether that be through a career within a corporate structure, working for somebody, or as an entrepreneur, and then put that in its own category, right? And then how it is that we look at socialist ideas in terms of how we share, right? How my hard work still in some ways has to contribute to a more important and a greater purpose and has to lead into the community in some kind of way. And then how do we see from a black male identity as I'm wrapping my head around how I contribute, you know, to myself in my own endeavors, how I contribute to the society as a whole, in terms of a socialist type view, but then how do I see the black community and my role in the black community as a man? Like, how do we get brothers to kind of see the distinctness of those things, but really find a balance in those areas?
That's a tough one,
man. That's
yeah.
good. You know, I when I would talk to young people about the black experience being uninhibited or not disrupted in any way, I always take them back to Reconstruction, right?
Okay.
That's 7 years.
Right.
We were left to our own devices, right?
Right.
And we were killing the game.
Senator Hiram Revels.
Yeah.
Right? Slavery to senator.
Slavery to senator. We were building our own towns. Mm-hmm. A lot of the riots after Reconstruction was because of some of the businesses we had built for ourselves. Like, we talk about Black Wall Street, but man, there were riots everywhere. Mm-hmm. So capitalism, we understand, right? But within that, I think there's always been a degree of socialism in there. Like, even when I grew up in the hood, for me to go knock on Miss Johnson's door to see if she had some butter,
right?
That was just the community. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was just the way we did. Hey, go see if so-and-so got sugar. We didn't have money. They didn't have money. They wanted to come over here. Hey, y'all got some flour? Right. It wasn't so much giving away your hard work or it was like, yo, making sure everybody was good.
Like a sense of sharing.
To say this too. When we talk about black, and when we talk about the days like Black Wall Street, like we said, to be honest, we really didn't have a choice like that, but to lean on each other. And I think that definitely helped us come together because we didn't really have much of a choice. So we didn't know what else we were gonna get it, so we had to. And as time went on, as we, you know, came together, integrated and all that, we have so much resource where we don't have to rely on each other so much as we did back then. And I think that's where the disconnect started happening, because we don't have to rely on each other every single day like we did back in the day when we went to your neighbor's house for some sugar or build businesses on Black Wall Street. We don't have to rely on each other so hard, or at least we think we don't have to.
Right.
And I think that's where the disconnect happens right there.
Right.
We don't have that sense of urgency. Like, man, brother, I need you, brother. Like, I need y'all. We need to have a village. We don't have that same sense of urgency anymore. And I think that's where the disconnect comes in right there.
And
how do we restore that?
I'm sorry. I think some parts of that I see here in the DC area, right? Mm-hmm. Like you go over to PG County, Maryland. It's one of the most uply mobile counties in the country, man. And like when my wife and I were invited out there to go out there, we were like, man, it ain't nothing but imagine Chandler with nothing but black people.
Nah,
I believe Sugarland is like that too. Sugarland, Texas.
Texas is like that, right? So it kind of trips you out. But another thing, I knew I wanted to go back to grad school once my wife finished her PhD. I wanted to be available to support her in any kind of way. If that meant getting my daughter to school when she was in high school, if that meant me doing the laundry and you know, to kind of, for her not to have to think about that. For some men, that's emasculating, right? To me, I'm like, I'm just helping my wife out. Mm-hmm. But I notice a lot more kids now, even with the NBA. Just last week, we saw the NBA get behind HBCUs. Right. So that is slowly, you kind of see that dynamic shift. I think I tend, and maybe because I'm in a bubble, most of my boys are pretty cool with, you know, their woman having a little bit more drive or owning their own business while they work that 9 to 5. You know what I'm saying? I'm being honest. There's parts of me that just really don't understand what's the issue. Like even the fragile ego, the sister in New York, I guess the brother bit her in the face or something like that. She was just trying to buy wine. Wow. And, you know, he was like, hey man, let me get that for you. You know, she was like, no, I'm okay. I'm cool. And I've seen this.
Oh, so I think I remember this. So he was trying to talk to her. She rejected him and he bit her in the face. Bit
her in the face, attacked her. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I hear that. So was he drunk?
Nah. I don't think he was.
I think so.
Just because he followed her in the liquor store. She was just going to buy a bottle of wine.
But I think I remember that though. Like that is an element in terms of brothers being rejected where they get on the offensive, and it may not be a bite, but it's a B word. It's a you ain't this, it's a you ain't that type of scenario. But I'm sorry.
I had another element to that.
Rejection.
Go ahead.
Another element to that happened in front of his boys. So now we're talking about accountability. Mm-hmm. He did that in front of his boys. He got dissed in front of his boys, and he did what he did with no accountability. He didn't have to worry about his homies getting on him. Like, man, we don't, you know, beating him up or getting on him about doing what he did. He didn't have no accountability. No brothers were going to stand up, and they actually laughed. And was it recorded? I'm not sure if it was recorded.
I think somebody recorded it. Like they chased her down the street, man. Like
so he didn't have any accountability. He wasn't worried about anything like that because that's just the way it was. That's how they do. So that's another reason why we have this mentality, because we don't have accountability where, you know, we don't have anybody else setting the standard like, yo, brother, no, that's not how we get down. So that's another reason that perpetuates.
I have to ask you, and you too, Anthony, how do you get brothers to a place where they're more whole in their identity and balanced in how they see the world, and their analysis is clear, to be able to just have better discernment in those moments, to have better judgment in how they make decisions, and how it is that they're able to take rejection, but at the same time still be self-actualized enough to know that their whole world is not being crushed because somebody has something negative to say. They don't have to go to, you know, to the offensive, but more importantly, their role in the community, they still want to have respect for themselves and respect for the women around them.
I'm gonna keep it honest, man. As a mentor for young men, I find it really, who said it? It's a lot easier to build men than fix broken men. All right. So I really feel like we got to get at them. That's why I focus on the youth. It's really, really critical that we get it in their heads as little boys, because you ask them how we get these men to think like this. How do we get these men to move like that? It's hard for me as a 34-year-old man to get other men to be like, no, this is how we think. It's probably the most challenging things. I could lead by example. I could do this and that, but when you're talking about how do we get men to think like this, big brother, man, it's quite a challenge, man. That's why I focus on boys, because I can't say to say how can we lead our men to think like that. I don't want to say it's impossible, but brother, it's something. It's some work, brother. It's tough.
You got to be open to it. I think I've changed the way I think about certain things. I'm gonna be honest. The Me Too movement, even though it got hijacked, when my wife explained to me why sisters were posting Me Too on their social media, because I'm like, what is that? And I saw that she posted it too. When she explained to me what that meant, man, I had to sit back and look at myself like, okay, how did I participate in this type of behavior, man? And if you feel embarrassed or you come to an understanding like, man, maybe there's some things that I need to change about myself. It's not easy by any means, right, but you're conscious of it. Like, you know what, what I did, I'm gonna be honest, man, they had me thinking about stuff I was doing when I was in undergrad. Like, man,
that's real. I count myself in that too. Definitely.
So, and then having conversations with other men in your age group.
Yeah.
When we were having these conversations, a lot of us were saying the same things. Like, man, I remember this one time I went over Shorty crib. It was like midnight. She knew I was coming over there for, but she wasn't doing that, so I refused to leave. And and then like back then you ain't you feeling justified. Like, you called me over here.
Right.
But then you sit back and think about it as a man in his 40s, like, you know what, if that had happened to my daughter, if my daughter would have called me, like, I invited this dude over, he won't leave, I'm going over there and we getting loose.
Right.
So you gotta
and then to touch on, oh, my bad.
No, I'm just saying, Black men we really need to start being honest with ourselves, but piggyback off of what Brother Anthony said, I kind of see the same thing too. Building rapport with young people and getting them to the point where you become somebody that they respect, and then you show them that how vulnerable you can be. They're like, well, dang, Brother Anthony, like, he was crying while he was sharing this story. This is somebody I respect. Right. You know what I mean? So being vulnerable might not be as bad as what people think. You know what I mean? But,